What if the most dangerous standoff of the decade is being quietly defused or secretly primed to explode behind closed doors tonight as Donald Trump steps back into the global spotlight and Iran signals, with carefully chosen words and calculated silences, that history may be repeating itself under far higher stakes because as the U.S. clock ticks toward the evening news hour and diplomatic channels hum with urgency, President Donald Trump has confirmed that talks with Iran are not only real, but active, unfolding under a strategy that blends public pressure, private negotiation, military signaling, and geopolitical brinkmanship. A strategy that echoes his first-term playbook, yet operates in a far more volatile world, where the Middle East is already strained by proxy conflicts, energy market fragility, and nuclear anxiety, and according to senior U.S. officials and multiple international sources, these talks are occurring through a mixture of direct and indirect channels, with intermediaries including Turkey and other regional actors attempting to broker a framework that could prevent military escalation while stopping short of restoring the old nuclear deal framework. Because Trump's approach this time is not about returning to the past, but about forcing a new equilibrium, one that he believes reasserts American dominance while compelling Tehran to concede ground it has refused to surrender for years. And the significance of this moment cannot be overstated, because Iran's nuclear enrichment levels, its regional influence through allied militias, and its internal political pressures have all reached a point where miscalculation could trigger a chain reaction no power could easily contain. Yet Trump, speaking with characteristic confidence, has suggested that Iran wants to talk, a phrase loaded with implication, signaling both leverage and warning. While U.S. naval assets have been repositioned in and around key waterways not merely as deterrence but as visual punctuation to diplomacy, reminding allies and adversaries alike that while the door to negotiation remains open, the cost of refusal is deliberately left ambiguous, and Iranian officials, for their part, have responded with a mixture of guarded openness and defiance, acknowledging progress in discussions while insisting on sovereignty, sanctions relief, and security guarantees, a rhetorical balancing act aimed at domestic audiences wary of American intentions and international partners anxious to avoid another Middle Eastern war. And as these signals ricochet through global capitals, markets respond nervously, oil prices flicker, defense analysts dissect satellite movements, and diplomats scramble to read between the lines of statements that are designed as much to conceal as to reveal, because at the heart of this unfolding drama lies a fundamental question that has haunted U.S.-Iran relations for decades. Can pressure and negotiation coexist without collapsing into conflict? And Trump's answer appears to be yes, provided the pressure is unmistakable and the negotiation is conducted from a position of visible strength, which explains why sources confirm that potential talks are being structured around phased commitments rather than sweeping agreements, with early confidence-building measures tied to verification mechanisms and incremental sanctions adjustments rather than blanket relief, a model Trump has long favored because it allows him to claim wins at each stage while retaining leverage, and Iran, facing economic strain and regional overextension, appears willing to test this path without fully committing, aware that walking away entirely risks isolation while conceding too much risks internal backlash. And this delicate dance is further complicated by regional actors, Israel watching closely and warning against concessions it views as dangerous, Gulf states quietly supporting de-escalation but publicly cautious, Russia and China positioning themselves as alternative partners while calculating how far to let Washington regain influence, and Europe attempting to revive its relevance as a mediator in a process it once helped design but no longer controls. And amid all this, Trump's messaging remains deliberately theatrical yet strategically consistent, alternating between warnings of bad things and hints of historic deals, a communication style critics call reckless, but supporters argue is precisely what forces movement in frozen conflicts. And as evening news programs prepare their top headlines, the reality behind the scenes is more complex than any soundbite, Because these talks are not occurring in isolation, but against a backdrop of recent ultimatums, covert exchanges, intelligence assessments, warning of narrowing timelines, and political calculations on both sides where leadership legitimacy is as much at stake as national security, and insiders describe an atmosphere of controlled urgency, where every word is weighed, every leak scrutinized, and every delay interpreted as either strategy or sabotage. And the stakes extend far beyond Washington and Tehran, because any outcome, deal, delay, or breakdown will reverberate through global security architectures, energy corridors, alliance systems, and domestic politics in ways that could define the next decade. And it is precisely this convergence of secrecy, power, risk, and ambition that makes tonight's developments not just another diplomatic update, but a pivotal chapter in an unfinished story, one in which Trump's return to center stage collides with Iran's moment of decision, and as officials on both sides prepare for what may be decisive meetings in the coming days, the world is left watching a familiar yet terrifying question unfold in real time. Are we witnessing the quiet prevention of war, or the calm before an unavoidable storm? And that question grows heavier by the hour because as diplomatic backchannels stretch late into the night, new details emerging from officials familiar with the process reveal that the structure of these discussions is far more intricate than a simple yes or no negotiation, instead resembling a multi-layered chess match in which every concession is paired with a counter-demand and every pause is weaponized as leverage, with U.S. negotiators pressing Iran not only on uranium enrichment thresholds, but also on inspection access timelines, ballistic missile limitations, and the regional activities of allied militias, issues that Tehran has historically treated as red lines, yet now appears willing to discuss in carefully circumscribed language, not as admissions of guilt, but as regional security assurances, a semantic shift that diplomats say is intentional and significant because it allows Iranian leadership to present engagement as strength rather than surrender, while Trump's team frames the same talks as evidence that maximum pressure works, that sanctions, isolation, and credible military readiness force adversaries to the table, and this dual narrative is being constructed simultaneously for domestic audiences on both sides, with Trump preparing to showcase progress as proof of decisive leadership and Iranian officials managing internal factions that remain deeply suspicious of American motives, especially after past agreements collapsed under shifting political winds. And this tension between memory and momentum defines the current moment, because neither side trusts the other. Yet both recognize that the cost of failure has escalated dramatically, as intelligence assessments circulating among allies warn that timelines for irreversible actions are narrowing and that a misread signal, a rogue incident, or a domestic political shock could derail diplomacy overnight. And this is why the military dimension remains so prominent, not as an immediate prelude to war, but as an ever-present reminder of consequence. With U.S. force posture adjustments serving both as deterrence and as reassurance to allies unsettled by the prospect of a deal they cannot fully influence, while Iran's own military messaging emphasizes readiness and resilience without crossing into provocation, a calibrated balance that reflects an awareness of how quickly markets, alliances, and public opinion can swing. And speaking of markets, analysts note that energy traders are already pricing in volatility scenarios tied to these talks, because a diplomatic breakthrough could ease supply anxieties while a collapse could trigger spikes that ripple through global inflation, making the outcome not just a security issue, but an economic one with household-level implications worldwide. And this interconnectedness explains why global powers are watching so intently, with Europe quietly urging restraint and continuity, Russia and China weighing how a U.S.-Iran thaw might reshape influence in the region, and neighboring states preparing contingency plans even as they publicly welcome dialogue. And at the center of it all stands Trump's unmistakable imprint on the process, a style that rejects slow multilateralism in favor of high-pressure engagement, dramatic signaling, and personalized negotiation, a style that has produced both breakthroughs and breakdowns in the past, and supporters argue that this very unpredictability is what keeps adversaries off balance and creates openings where traditional diplomacy failed, while critics warn that it risks miscalculation in an environment where the margin for error is vanishingly thin. And yet, as sources close to the talks emphasize, there is a shared recognition on both sides that this window, however fragile, may not reopen if it closes now, because domestic politics, regional alignments, and strategic realities are shifting fast, and so the talks continue hour by hour, statement by statement, leak by leak, unfolding under the glare of speculation and the weight of history, with each carefully crafted sentence carrying layers of meaning intended for multiple audiences at once. And as tonight's news cycle draws to a close, one truth stands out amid the uncertainty. This is not a symbolic exchange or a diplomatic formality. It is a high-stakes negotiation whose outcome could redefine U.S.-Iran relations, recalibrate power across the Middle East, and determine whether the next chapter is written in agreements and inspections or in warnings and retaliations. And as viewers around the world absorb these developments, the story remains unfinished, suspended between possibility and peril, with Donald Trump and Iran locked in a moment that could either be remembered as the turning point that pulled the region back from the edge, or the final missed chance before escalation, a moment where history is not yet decided but is being actively negotiated, line by line behind doors that the world can sense but not see, of controlled urgency where every word is weighed, every leak scrutinized, and every delay interpreted as either strategy or sabotage. And the stakes extend far beyond Washington and Tehran, because any outcome, deal, delay, or breakdown will reverberate through global security architectures, energy corridors, alliance systems, and domestic politics in ways that could define the next decade. And it is precisely this convergence of secrecy, power, risk, and ambition that makes tonight's developments not just another diplomatic update, but a pivotal chapter in an unfinished story. One in which Trump's return to center stage collides with Iran's moment of decision, and as officials on both sides prepare for what may be decisive meetings in the coming days, the world is left watching a familiar yet terrifying question unfold in real time. Are we witnessing the quiet prevention of war, or the calm before an unavoidable storm?